Two squad cars pulled into my driveway 40 minutes after my son told me he wished I'd never been his father. And for a moment I genuinely believed he'd finally decided to have me arrested for the crime of showing up uninvited to wish him a happy Father's Day. Let me explain how a card and a box of his favorite donuts turned into handcuffs almost being involved. My name is Walter, and my son Brendan and I hadn't spoken in 8 months before that morning. The silence started, if I'm honest with myself, long before that, a slow erosion that began 3 years earlier when Brendan married Priya, and I said something at their wedding rehearsal dinner that I've regretted every day since. A joke, poorly timed, about interfaith marriages, something I meant as harmless in the moment and understood far too late had cut deeper than I ever intended. I apologized. Brendan accepted it technically the way you accept an apology from someone you're not ready to fully forgive yet. Things stayed cordial after that, strained but functional until 8 months ago when I made a comment about how Brendan and Priya were raising my granddaughter Maya, 4 years old, bright as anything. I'd suggested at a birthday party surrounded by family that Maya seemed confused about which holidays she was supposed to celebrate, given that Brendan and Priya were raising her with both of our family traditions rather than choosing one. I watched Brendan's face change in real time. I watched 20 years of small comments apparently finally reach a breaking point I hadn't seen building. "That's it," he said, quiet, controlled in a way that scared me more than yelling would have. "We're done here, Dad." 8 months of silence followed. No calls returned, no responses to texts. My wife, Carol, told me repeatedly to give him space, that pushing harder would only push him further away, and for once in my stubborn life I actually listened to her. Until Father's Day arrived and something in me decided 8 months was long enough. I drove to Brendan's house with a card I'd written and rewritten 4 times, finally settling on something simple: an apology without excuses, an acknowledgement that I'd spent years making careless comments dressed up as jokes, and a request, not a demand, for the chance to be better. I brought donuts from the bakery Brendan had loved since he was 12 years old, the same order every time, chocolate glazed with sprinkles. Priya answered the door, surprised, cautious. "Walter." "He didn't tell me you were coming." "He doesn't know," I admitted. "I should have called first. I wasn't sure he'd let me if I did." She hesitated, then let me in, which I'm grateful for even now, considering everything that followed. Brendan was in the kitchen, and the moment he saw me standing there holding a donut box like some kind of peace offering, his expression hardened into something I hadn't seen directed at me before: not disappointment, which I'd grown used to over the years, but something closer to exhaustion mixed with real anger. "You need to leave," he said. "Brendan, I just want 5 minutes. I wrote you a card. I want you to know I understand what I said. Leave, Dad. I wish you'd never been my dad." The words came out fast, sharp, the kind of sentence that once said can't be unsaid, hanging in that kitchen like something physical. Maya in the next room went quiet, old enough to sense tension even if she didn't understand the words. I stood there, stunned, the donut box suddenly feeling absurd in my hands. "Brendan, you need to leave my house right now," he said, voice shaking now, "or I'm calling the police." I didn't believe him. That was my mistake. I stayed rooted in place, still trying to find words that might undo what had just been said, and Brendan, true to his word, picked up his phone and called. I want to be honest about what happened next, because it's not the story you might expect from that setup. The two officers who arrived weren't hostile. They separated us calmly, asked Brendan what he needed, asked me why I was there. I explained everything: the card, the donuts, the 8 months of silence I was trying to end. One of the officers, a woman probably close to my own son's age, looked at the card still sitting unopened on the counter and back at Brendan with an expression that made him visibly uncomfortable. "Sir," she said to Brendan, "your father hasn't done anything illegal. He's not a threat, and honestly, based on what I'm seeing here, this looks like something that needs a conversation, not a police report." Brendan's face flushed. I panicked. I didn't think, I just wanted him out of my house. "That's understandable," she said, "but we can't arrest someone for showing up with donuts and a card, even an unwelcome one. We can ask him to leave if that's genuinely what you want, and he'll leave. That's it." I left that day. Not because the police made me, but because I finally understood, standing in that kitchen with officers between us, that showing up unannounced had been its own kind of pressure. Another version of me forcing my presence into a situation on my terms instead of his. I drove home, and for the first time in 8 months I didn't text him. I didn't call. I let the silence stretch differently this time, not out of stubbornness but out of something closer to respect. 3 weeks later Priya called me, not Brendan. "He's been different since Father's Day," she said. "Angrier at first, then quieter. I think seeing those officers not take his side the way he expected actually shook something loose in him. He's been talking to a therapist. He mentioned you more than once." I didn't push. I sent one text, simple, no expectations attached. "I'm here whenever you're ready, no rush." It took another 6 weeks before Brendan called me himself, late on a Tuesday evening, his voice tired in a way that told me he'd been building up to this call for a while. "I need to tell you something," he said. "The therapist thing, it's not really about you specifically. It's about how I learned to handle conflict. I watched you and Mom for years, never really talking things through, just letting things fester until somebody exploded. I did the same thing to you. 8 months of silence, then calling the cops on my own father because I didn't know how to just say I was still hurt and needed space. I should have called before showing up," I admitted. "I've spent your whole life showing up on my terms and calling it love. I'm working on understanding that's not the same thing as actually listening to what you need." We talked for almost 2 hours that night, longer than we'd spoken in years combined. Both of us finally saying things that 8 months, and honestly 3 years of surface-level cordiality, had never made room for. Things are better now, genuinely better, not performed for holidays but built slowly through actual honesty. Brendan and I have dinner once a month now, just the two of us, no agenda beyond actually talking. Maya calls me on video chats twice a week, unprompted, something Brendan started encouraging once he understood how much those small comments about her upbringing had actually come from my own fear of becoming irrelevant, not judgment of how they were raising her. Last Father's Day, a full year after the police showed up in that driveway, Brendan called me first thing in the morning. "I'm making breakfast," he said. "Come over. No donuts required this time." I stood in that same kitchen, a year later, watching my son flip pancakes for his daughter, and understood something I wished I'd learned decades earlier. Sometimes the people who love us the most are the ones who finally have to say the hardest things out loud, even if it takes handcuffs almost coming out of a squad car to get there. I didn't get arrested that Father's Day. What I got instead, eventually, quietly, was something far more valuable. A second chance I hadn't earned yet, and the humility to finally understand what earning it would actually require.